Well, welcome everybody. I'm Catherine Livick, and this is my esteemed colleague, Christina Wombold. And we're both from ESD 112 in Vancouver, Washington. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what computer science and project-based learning have in common and how we can kind of fit them all together. So we're going to start by talking about kind of the foundational concepts of each, because some of you are here because you're already interested in computer science, so maybe you know a little bit about that. Maybe project-based learning is still a mystery to you, or the opposite. Maybe you know a lot about PBL and not much about CS, and either way is fine. And we are happy to start at the beginning, and if the rest of you kind of can bear with us, we'll get through those foundational concepts. Then we're going to talk about how it all kind of goes together and how you might get started on integrating these two things together in your classroom. Now, they are we're just going to scratch the surface, because of course you can do weeks and weeks of study on each of these as their foundational concepts to get better at it. But just to give you an idea of how it works is our goal for today, and hope that you'll come away with some nuggets of an idea of what you might like to do and some samples of how other people have started to do it. And what we hope also is that if we do this presentation again in a year, we're going to have more examples of how people have done it, because it's going to be happening more. So we're excited to see how that goes. So we go to the next one. Thanks. Why would we do this? Why do we want to do this? CS and PBL have a lot of things in common. And if we pull out kind of the main themes that they have in common, both really support practicing 21st century skills of critical thinking, problem solving, collaborating, and communicating. Now, if you talk to employers um, about what skills they want to see people coming into the workforce with, that's what they say. They don't want them to have high level computer programming skills necessarily, although in some fields they're wishing that people had better background in that. They always need people who know how to work together. They always need people who know how to define a problem and to communicate about that problem. Computer science and project-based learning, those are essential components of both of those things. So they work together really well in that way. Computer science is also everywhere. It's in every aspect of daily life, and it should be incorporated in education. The thing about computers is that a lot of us spend time consuming technology and not creating it. And when we start teaching computer science, we open the doors to creating, not just consuming. There's nothing wrong with consuming. We all do it. It is what we must do to live on a biological and social level. But if you're able to create a little too and to understand how things fit together, it makes a big difference in the type of quality of life that you're able to have in general. And the bottom line is, when you think about it, technology is a means for solving problems. So if we're using project-based learning, which we also call problem-based learning sometimes, we're starting with a problem. Technology is one of the main tools that we use to solve those problems. It's not the solution itself, but it's one of the tools. And if you have a deep grounding in how you might be able to create a tool to solve something, you have a big advantage and a big head start on anything that you want to do in the future. Christina, did you have anything to add on that one before we go on?
Absolutely. So, project based learning, the core of it is really about solving an authentic problem for students. And often this leads itself into some kind of technology, as students have choice and voice in how they solve that problem. So, there's a real natural blend between a project based learning problem that I'm trying to address, as well as a computer science activity that I'm asking the kids to complete. So they go very well together. I want you to take a moment, and I know the screen might be hard to read, but just take a moment to read this screen. And as you do, I want you to think about what word stands out to you. And as that word stands out to you, I'd like you to place it in our session chat. authentic, complex, engaging. All of these words are happening in our computer science classes when we're digging in and we're learning and tinkering and playing, and they're happening when we're doing our project-based learning. That's why they fit so well together. It explicitly positions the teacher and the students as co-practitioners of a discipline or skill, rather than the teacher being the source of knowledge and the student as the receiver. PBL flips the traditional idea of students simply receiving information from the teacher. We're on the stage, we're giving it to you, to we're doing this together. And we're really putting the kids in the driver's seat and all the scary things that that implies, the risks and rewards of that metaphor, when the students are really getting deep into solving an authentic problem. When we look at project-based learning's foundational pieces, there are gold standards for project-based learning, and then there's teachers' practices. And of those gold standards, we're really looking at critique, revision, and reflection. That is computer science. Programming, putting that code together, debugging that code, working together with others, test, fail, succeed. That is happening all the time. We build a very strong program of an authentic problem, and then the students have choice in how they solve that problem. That public product, while many teachers may use that as an assessment and grade, that's just the end. That's the cool thing we get to play with. All the learning that happens in between there is really where we're pulling out those skills and those components of computer science as well as the problem. Catherine, your turn.
All righty. So you may be able to tell I drew this little picture myself because it's not that great, but this was the visual metaphor that came into my mind when I started thinking about just giving an overview of those foundational concepts of computer science. So we've talked a little bit about the foundational PBL, and now I want to talk about the foundations of computer science. It's not just coding, programming. It's not just knowing how to do the programming of the computer. We can do computer science without a computer. We can do unplugged coding. A lot of you have probably heard of some of those activities. But when we think about the practices that we engage in when we're doing computer science, just like science has practices, ELA has practices, social studies has practices. What are we doing when we are in that place of working in that discipline? And for computer science, the tops of my little castle there are the concepts that you really need to know about when you're doing computer science. We have to know about computing systems, networks, impacts of computing, algorithms and programming, data analysis, and there are practices that we engage in, which we'll talk about in a moment, to practice to get into those concepts. And those are supported by the foundational ideas of computational thinking, which are decomposition, pattern matching, abstraction, and automation. So we can move these into any subject area we want, and we can fit them into any problem that we're going to solve. The first thing we do when we have a problem in front of us is decompose it. We need to break it down into smaller bits so that we can start to solve it. And then we're going to try to find patterns in there. We're going to eventually be able to hopefully abstract out some bits of it so we can make it useful in a broader way. And then eventually we can automate it, let the robots do it, let the computer do it, and then we can go about our business and, have a cup of coffee and chill out. So these concepts are really easy to bring into any kind of problem solving place that we're at. We go to the next one, Christy. Thank you all. So we're going to talk about connecting the practices, and we're just going to scratch the surface of this as well. We'll just talk about a few of the connections that can be made. There's all kinds of them. So for example, when your students are contemplating a challenging problem or a question, like the problem that you would start with for a PBL unit, they need to recognize which parts are computational in nature Which parts are things that we need data or need to quantify? They need to define specific sub-issues within the problem. So we have the practices of computer science over here on the left, and the practices for, what do we call these? The classroom practice. I'm using the wrong terminology, Christy.
Yeah, they're the essential elements of a project-based learning.
Thank you. See, that's why I have her here, because she's the PBL expert. And we have the recognizing and defining computational problems practice over here on the left. We have the challenging problem or question on the right. Really obvious how those fit together. You can take a look at these for a moment, and hopefully if that's big enough on your screen, you can see, and maybe you could pull out a couple of other connections between these two. So I'm going to pause for a moment and let you look at these two sets of practices and see if you notice any connections. Maybe you could drop into the chat if you have any other connections.
Remember, we pinned the presentation to the top of the chat. So if you need to see it on your own screen and you have that ability, that would be great.
I'll give you a second to look at it. Wait time is always extra awkward in a virtual space. I'm like, I feel like I should be doing a little dance or something, but I'll spare you. It's way too early in the morning for that. You're a bad influence on me, Christina. And yeah, and again, if you do want to click on the presentation deck and pull it up, it's probably a little bit easier to see. Maybe there's something about communicating, about computing that could match up to something on the right. If you all feeling shy this morning, it's okay. I'll let you off the hook, but I'm going to give you a few minutes more.
Yeah, the collaboration is so big in the project-based learning world, which lends so well to how we do computer science, in that we are always working together and building off of each other's ideas. And no code is ever created by just one person. There's always an iteration of it. So yes, I totally agree with the collaboration piece. Testing and refining goes along with critique and revision. And something that we do in project-based learning is that we intentionally teach students how to critique and how to revise their end product along the way. And we give lots of opportunities for critique, revision, peer feedback, continuing that loop. Because by the time they get to the end, their program, they should already have achieved all of the goals that we've set in there, all the learning tasks. It's part of the process.
And the great part is that with project-based learning, you're learning by doing. You're not absorbing information and then at some unspecified point in the future, you get to do stuff with it. We all know that there have been times that we've sat in class and not been engaged because we weren't allowed to do anything yet. And that's why we try to build interaction into even something like this. It might be minimal, but we want you to reflect on how this applies to you. And that's how this would work in the classroom with a project-based unit. When you're doing computer science, when you're creating computational artifacts, exactly, David just read my mind, that's where you get to engage directly and learn by doing and by making mistakes and by debugging. You're living through this. This is not something that's happening in the future. You're doing it right now.
And it really helps to build up the resiliency of our students. We see so many students right now that are just so used to immediate gratification. And I've got this done and I'm done, so I move on and learn the next thing. In project-based learning, there's never an end. There's always a go back and refine and revise and critique, which is similar to what we're doing in our programming world. When we're revising that code and we're simplifying it, when we're decomposing, all the words this morning.
And I have my personal child is the kid who's like the really smart kid who never wants to make a mistake. And if he doesn't already know how to do it, he's like, I don't want to, because he doesn't want to do that process of testing, debugging, refining. But he taught himself how to code by reverse engineering scripts in Roblox And he does that all the time. And I had to point out to him yesterday, I said, you know, when your English teacher says, don't rush through this, I want you to engage in a revision process and work with your peers. I said, how is that different from what you're doing when you're testing your Roblox game with your friends and then you go back and change stuff? And he went, and so I'm really hoping that kind of went in, you know, is that's a hard thing for a lot of kids. It's less about being afraid to try and more about, well, I should already know how to do it. So I just like how this makes the whole deal about everybody is making mistakes and refining. That to me is a huge deal. And yeah, I hope that connection to the writing process does sink in for him. I've done it with other kids, but you know, it never works with your own kid. In case anyone is wondering, I forgot to mention this. These practices that you're seeing on the left are from the K-12 CS framework. There will be a link for you. I believe it's on the last slide. If it isn't there already, I'm going to make sure it gets there. The K-12 CS framework is what was used to build the standards for computer science for Washington State. So these are our foundational practices. What the standards and the benchmarks for every grade level came out of that. And the orange graphic here for PBL is from the Buck Institute, and we'll have links to their PBL information as well. Are we ready for the next one?
Yes, we are.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about connecting the practices, and just to pull out one example, I think you're all kind of getting the idea because you had some great stuff to say. But if we look at the challenging problem or question for PBL, and we look at recognizing and defining computational problems, we're at the very beginning of this process for project-based learning. And Christina is going to talk to you a little bit more about how driving questions are created and how that connects.
So an essential component of any well-designed project-based learning is a real-world connection or a problem to solve. Often in project-based learning, we'll start off with an entry event. We'll have some kind of engaging skit, video, activity experience so that students can get really into it before they decide what they're actually going to learn from this process. As they engage in this learning experience, the teacher in the back end has already aligned various standards. What am I going to get out of this project? What are my high impact content standards? These are the top of my pyramid of my Bloom's taxonomy. I've grabbed these standards. I've kind of put together a learning experience for my students. And then with my students, we decide what our driving question is. What is our problem? What is our authentic real world connection, problem, product going to be? And this is going to be placed up on the wall. It might be written all over our Google Classroom, our Canvas, everywhere in the place. As students go ahead and look at that as what we're working towards, and then we build all of our curiosity from that. What is that going to drive us? So we take how can we as educators create an application that does X, does Y, does whatever. And the students can then take their need to knows because they need to solve this problem. So they write up all their questions, all their things that they want. And then we look at what standards we're trying to work towards and we build that together. So we have students that I worked with 2 years ago now, COVID world. I can't remember when I last saw kids. We worked with first graders and they were using how does the light and sound impact my classroom behavior? And in this process, the students had to code and program a light sensor and had to read that light sensor and reflect on how they felt when the light changed, was really bright versus really dark. Did it calm their mood? And then they did this with sound and they had to figure out how are they going to measure sound in their classroom. And they were able to create a program and do that. And then they monitored that. Those are just one little example of how they could take this big question and dive deep and have students have voice and choice in what the outcome looks like. Some of the other embeddings of CS into project-based learning are that, like I said, we start with the standards. So a lot of people have this misconception that project-based learning is just fluffy and that we're making, volcanoes in the backyard. Yeah, we might be making volcanoes, but there are going to be other ways to look at that. They're always going to be embedded in their standards. The activities, all the work that we do in our computer science class, the engineering, the iterations, the approaches to solve multiple problems, the research into whatever specific thing we're looking for, the peer review, the coding of the robotics, the creation of the product, and the working with the team all come from this wheel here, this blue and green wheel here, which are the project-based learning gold standards for the teaching practices, how we teach. When you look at that right there, I know you can make connections to how you're already teaching in your classroom. How the process of coding and programming with your students and computational thinking leads to this. That revision, that sustained inquiry. We have to keep going back and looking. We have to keep learning more. And we give a lot of student voice and choice. I will not know how to solve all these problems. I will not be the expert on the program or whatever language we're using necessarily. I'll be able to guide them. But it's letting my students lead the way embedded in the standards. When we think about debugging in project-based learning, we call this critical critique. And we actually have a charrette protocol where we teach students to go to their team, say, hey, this is the problem I'm having. Help me with this one thing. Now think about that when you're pair coding. You're asking your peer to help you with that piece of code. Lots of critique, lots of revision, lots of engaging and coaching. Really, when you are doing project-based learning in your classroom, you are coaching. You are leading the conversations based by that big driving question, always bringing you back. Catherine, do you have anything to add there?
I think you pulled it out really well to show those connections. And of course, there are lots of other places, to make the connections. We just want to spark your ideas and get you thinking a little bit about it. Because project-based learning is so broad, and because you can connect it to something that's actually authentically interesting and happening to your students, you can just go just about anywhere with this. And I know Christine has an example coming up of a STEM unit that incorporates CS and PBL, but I'm hoping that after she presents that, if any of you have experience with project-based learning or have something that you're thinking, maybe the wheels are turning in your mind right now and you're going, I could blend some CS into this thing that I already do. I'm hoping that we can get you to at least place in the chat maybe an idea that you might have. So while we go on with this other example, if anything's bubbling up in your mind, we'd love to hear from you in a few minutes.
Absolutely. So PBL Works, formerly BIE, has a ton of resources. However, when you go to this resource, you're not going to see full lesson plans. It's not going to tell you what to do day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and all of the activities in between. It's going to start with the driving question. And in this case here, the driving question that this is looking at is, how can observing the natural world help us find solutions to human problems? Now, this is considered a STEM lesson. It is not coded as a CS lesson, but it's so easy to get there because when we connect our next generation standards, ask questions, make observations, develop a simple sketch, create a test. Sorry, my words are not working today. Making observations and evidence-based accounts, preparing an effective range, presenting information, like all of this can go into coding, can go into computational thinking, can go into solving different problems. So when you go out to your PBL Works, and you will have to have an account, you can see the learning standards. You can see the major products. So they were going to make a prototype of a panel of science, a prototype of their solution, and present it to scientists and engineers. That's easy. That could go so many different directions. It gives you considerations, and it gives you considerations for other content that you can embed in here. I'd love to hear your just initial thoughts of what could we do using computer science to answer this question. How can observing the natural world help us find solutions to human problems? Does that spark any ideas right off the top of your heads? This is a first grade problem.
I love that it's a first grade problem, because that is some seriously deep, like, it's making us think, and we're, grown-ups and stuff. So I just love that we're not waiting for the kids to get older to start that really deep learning.
No, and this inspires so many questions. Like, well, what is the human problem that I want to solve?
Yep. And we don't have to wait till they're older to do the computer science part either.
And how can I observe the nature? What if it's raining outside? What if we can't go outside and observe the natural world?
How could we?
That's a great problem for kids to solve. How can we, the students are going to be exploring the behaviors of plants and animals that protect them from dangerous and other things. They could code this in Scratch and explain it to us. There's just so many areas we could go into. I love that.
Any place that students have to show what they know is an opportunity for them to create a computational artifact. So when we used to think, well, you have to just write me a paragraph, or you have to draw me a picture, and then maybe we expanded our minds a little into, to use Google My Maps, you can create a custom map layer that shows what you know. And then maybe we can go, they learned how to do a PowerPoint. Well, now they can create a presentation that's interactive. They can get some very deep learning by creating all kinds of interactive stuff that their peers can use. So,
I love Patrick's idea in here. How do the changing seasons affect birds in our region? See, that driving question can really spark so much research, so much inquiry, so many different pathways. You can see how you could bring in math and data collection in here. You can see how you can create an algorithm for taking a picture so many times to observe the birds, or record a video, counting, just so many things. So many things. I had a time where my students were researching. They were doing a project-based learning session, and it was, how was the Native American lives impacted by the colonization of Florida, of whatever, the 13 colonies. My students decided that they could show me that through a Minecraft module. And as I went through this Minecraft module, they had to teach me how to use Minecraft, by the way, because I didn't have any clue. It was 2011. I was like, what is this thing? But it all fit my rubric. And they were able to, we'd go and find these different hidden books that would teach us more about how they were impacted. My kids were so engaged. Had I asked them to write a 5-paragraph essay, I would have got half of that engagement, half of that excitement, and a lot less inquiry.
And I want to say that applies to grown-ups as well, because Christina and I presented at ACPE this past spring, which was virtual because of the plague. And instead of we're just taking it online to a platform like this, they did that, but they also created a Discord server and a Minecraft server for the folks presenting at the conference and for the people in the group. So they had a whole Minecraft world set up. There were prizes hidden in it. Go find they had all kinds of activities literally taking place in this virtual space. And the people in the group and some of their children built that space. And and the problem they were solving was, how do we make a virtual conference feel more real and interactive? So this is not just happening in grade school or with kids who love video games. This is, anybody can get a piece of this kind of concept.
Oh, and one of my other favorites was when they made the interactive bulletin board. So there was a group of students that were able to use Scratch and Makeys, could have been microbits now that they've become more advanced. And they built a fake wall. And behind this fake wall was a bunch of Chromebooks set up with the Scratch. And by using the Makeys, when you went up to their part of the poster, the frog, the whatever, and pushed on it, it would tell you something about the story. So as a school, all fifth graders put together this mural that built upon each other. Look at the collaboration there. Look at all the debugging and decomposition that was happening to break down who's going to do which portion, how is the story going to build off of each other. We're talking 5 classes. And it became this amazing interactive display that also taught a lot of things in their school. I'd love to hear what you guys have done. What kind of projects, ideas is this spurring? I love that Dawn has put in here. They've used Minecraft for demonstrating what a cell is. That's awesome.
Very cool. And don't feel like if you have an idea, it doesn't have to be a fully developed idea. We're not going to ask you to turn in your lesson plans. We just are curious to see what people are thinking, because, you know, we think that we've thought through this a lot and we have all these ideas, and then someone will just completely blow our minds, you know, and that's why we have this learning community. We want to hear what other people are thinking.
Some other topics are like, what makes somebody a community hero?
I like that.
And how can I make a model to represent that community hero? And that could be done in so many different ways. How can we teach people about the weather in our community? And that makes me think about our weather bits. That makes me think about the projects that we're doing with coding and climate, where we have students coding microbits to collect data on rain and wind and all sorts of things.
GIS for native plants throughout our region. Oh, that's cool, Kim.
Ooh, I'd love that, because there's so many plants in my backyard I need some more like information on.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have some kind of tool to help me with that.
So like a map with layers for specific types of plants could even be created. Like, where are the good fungi? You know, like where are the herbal plants? You know, whatever we've got. That's very cool.
Which mushrooms can I eat versus which ones I should stay away from?
Yeah, I'm not brave enough for that one.
There can go even further. We have, what's the true cost of the things we buy?
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. With that tool, we had, I can't remember the name of it, where there was a great website where you could go and see like a family in another country and how much all of their stuff, like in one photo. Yeah. Oh, what is that website? Now I got to find it. And it really gave you an idea of consumption and like, you know, resources that are used throughout the world.
I love Christy's comment here. Yeah, a lot of us have curriculum. And yeah, we can turn the page and we can do that curriculum, but that curriculum is really a resource to help build upon our standards. And project-based learning, if we really identify 3 high impact content standards for one content. So let's say I'm doing a CS PBL. So I'm going to take 3 of my CS concepts. They're going to be the ones that are create, analyze, debate, those really high Bloom's taxonomy standards. And then I can use my curriculum to supplement those mini lessons, because project-based learning doesn't mean I'm not teaching. I'm still doing mini lessons. It just means that I'm not the center of all the learning. My students are going to teach me as well as we go through this. Yeah, it can be difficult when you're pushed to the curriculum, but if you pull out those standards and you just use that curriculum to supplement, how am I going to teach Pythagorean theory right now? How am I going to teach this other little piece? that helps the students with the bigger problem that they're learning or investigating.
And it seems to me, and Christy, you're being the PBL expert, will correct me if I'm wrong, but I keep thinking that if I were to do, a project-based learning unit when I'm first starting out, and I haven't done anything but kind of follow my curriculum. I was a social studies teacher, so I'm just thinking about my social studies curriculum for ancient world civ that I taught, that I would open the book and go, okay, here's this chapter and what's the big idea in this chapter. And so I could start small there and try to create a driving question from that. And I remember that even bajillion years ago when I was teaching social studies, we had questions, like key questions at the beginning of the chapter. And I think they may not be complete as a driving question, but I think you could build on those. And then you can also tell your administrator, your district, well, I am sticking with the curriculum. This is the question from the front of the unit in the book, but we just did it better.
I was,
Oh, Christy, I hear that too. Jeez. I'm like, but it's so much fun. Yeah. You go.
I love David's suggestion here. How can we, going back to David's, how can we use nature to help with internet connectivity?
Oh, wow. That would be nice. That's an issue probably out where you are, David, more than we see as much on this side of the state. I think the east side of the state has problems with people having internet connectivity. Not that we don't have rural areas, other places, but it seems like it's more widespread where you're at.
I'm going to go back to Stacy's question here. I love these questions. It really is like thinking back to those thematic units that we used to have in grade school when we were kids. September was Apple Month, and everything we did had Apple Month bedded into it. We colored apples, we counted apples, we wrote about apples, we did all these things. In project-based learning, we're going to do that, but we're doing it with our driving question, and always with our high impact content standards at the center, so that we really know why we were writing about apples, not just because it was Apple Month, but that it connected together. So project-based learning, yes, can be very much like thematic units. It gives us a goal. It should be sustained. So it should be 2 weeks at the very lowest, and sometimes 6 to 8 weeks. And so that can make people feel really nervous when they're not following their curriculum lockstep, because it's 6 to 8 weeks of my time that I'm committing to this. But when you look at your project, you're going to be able to see that you have your high impact content standards. These are the ones the kids will remember 10 years later after your project. And then you're going to see all these other connections to your standards. I sometimes have teachers write every standard out that meets this project because they're so worried about their admin, not understanding that this 6 to 8 weeks is so important. But when you just look at those 3 content standards and you assess them, you will see how all that other stuff fits in there. So when I'm working with teachers, and I was just working with a small school last week before, can't even remember the days anymore. Their principal said, you can throw away your curriculum. You can put your curriculum to the side because I know you're working on the standards. And that's a resource. The curriculum is a resource to achieving the standards. It is not the standards. Most of these curriculums have never been built in Washington State, so they don't align anyways. Even with Common Core standards, there's still some differences there. I'm going to pause. I love reading.
I like Dawn's mention up there. I get it. It's like you have to dive in before you can bend. But I mean, I guess you would just go when you're diving into that curriculum and reading, you're maybe in the back of your mind, how will I create a driving question from this and what are the possibilities? And I don't think you have to do it all at once. I know that
small pieces.
Yeah, with CS integration, you can't do it all at once. You can't do it ever all the time, and you're not going to be perfect at it right away. And I think PBL is the same thing. It's okay to just start thinking along those lines, because even if you can incorporate little bits, and I think one of the main things, again, Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I think PBL, I think shifting the focus and the center, like you said, to the students.
Absolutely.
Make them do the work.
Student-centered.
Where can I make them do the work, make them use the tool instead of me using it on them, at them kind of thing.
They need to be the owners of the learning.
Yeah.
They need to feel like they have the ability to take the learning where they're interested in. Again, we have these parameters. We have our standards that are keeping us grounded, but we are really trying to let the students take us in the direction that interests them. True, authentic engagement is interest. I want to learn. I want to know this thing.
Yeah, Don, we are spreading this gospel to admins as hard and fast as we can. we have tried. I mean, there's a lot of, there's so many initiatives that come flying at a school district or a principal or a curriculum director, and they will be like, well, I don't know how to focus on all these things, so I'm just going to pretend that computer science standards don't exist in elementary. So we're working on that very gently to say, here's why you should care, and here's how you can
project. Like when you put a project in front of a student or you put a driving question in front of a student, they tend to go directly towards a technology answer. They want to create a Minecraft module. They want to create a Scratch. They want to create a law. It leads the students to where they are interested. These phones, they're in their hands all the time. They're always using technology. So they might as well use it to learn and share their understanding. Ooh, I need to pause and read.
Yep. Oh, I love mystery science.
Yes, focus back on that driving question and leave room for student voice and choice. Does everybody's product need to look the same?
Yep. That's hard too. Like it can be hard to let go. And I used to have all these little weird conversations with myself. Well, I'm weird, so I talk to myself all the time anyway, but it's like, okay, I have to have them do this and this. Do you? Well, I guess I only have to have them do this. Okay, why? And then like I would kind of go through, okay, can I let this bit of it go? And I also made the mistake where I went too far the other direction and went, go do this thing, kids. And they all went, what? And stared at me for a week. So you do have to scaffold, you have to structure, but just the fact that you're thinking about that and the fact that you're thinking about, like how to give them more options and what you can let go of. I think that makes a huge difference and that starts you down the road.
And for me, that's my rubric. So I take those 3 high impact content standards, the 3 that I actually care about for this unit, and I make them my rubric. And then as long as the student's product fits those 3 criterion, it shows understanding, it shows what they need to show me of mastery of those 3 concepts, then it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a poster. It could be a Minecraft. It could be a PlayStation game. One year I had a student whose father worked for PlayStation. He created PlayStation games. And this student went and taught us about the Native Americans, again, the same project, through PlayStation game. Yes, her dad was highly involved in the coding of the PlayStation, obviously, but she knew the content. It was a history content lesson. I didn't care if she knew how to build the PlayStation game, although it was pretty cool. And now I can think of the CS connections and all the other pieces, but I wasn't that involved in CS at that time. I was just excited, and my student was excited to share her learning with us. And she got to spend some time with her dad. That's never a bad thing.
That's pretty cool.
And it made projects so much more fun. Like the day when they're presenting their projects and you have variety and you don't have 75 posters that look exactly the same, it's kind of fun.
I mean, why do we want to bore ourselves? Let's be honest. We can make it a little easier on ourselves. And that's Don was mentioning, it only goes to 5th, the mystery science. I noticed that with a lot of things. I mean, we can extrapolate and create stuff in the similar framework, but I think there's some perception among some people who create curriculum that like, well, middle school, time to get serious. Like we're not being serious with projects that are open-ended. I think that we are working to dispel that idea. Like there's a lot of myth busting that I do in my daily job with trying to demystify computer science and technology and show people how they can really, not be a speed bump, but be something that helps you do your job. And I think that happens with a lot of those concepts too, with project-based learning, that it's not serious, it's not rigorous, it's not, and it's, when in reality, it's very deep learning and very rigorous, and just, you just have to kind of, I think you have to do it to really see how it
You
works.
do have to do it. I know that the mystery science is pretty cool, but I wanted to place this resource in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
These are FOSS aligned stories, so project-based learning themes that go along with the FOSS kits. And these are being written by my colleague Pranjali at 112. And it gives you that driving question. So if you were able to, sound an energy unit for 4th grade, she has the driving questions marked out. She has come up with some different ways for you to slowly start initiating your project-based learning practices in your classroom. So I wanted to make sure that you're aware of these resources. She's always adding more, and it's always embedded in a phenomenon, a problem, an authentic real-world connection, because students can no longer continue to learn in this siloed bubble. I'm looking at our time, and I know that we have more to share, but I wanted to point out that we have put together some resources for you, and we really hope that on your own time today, or maybe next week, or maybe in 2 weeks, that you poke around and look at some of these things. When you go to the PBL Works website, you will need to register with an email to access their resources. But there's so many of them. And like I said, they don't give us the step-by-step day 1, day 2, day 3, but it does give us a driving question that we could then adapt and change. It gives us a final product. It gives us considerations for skills and contents. How are we going to engage those 21st century skills of collaboration, communication, creativity, and all of that? So it gives you a nice launching point. And then you can go back to that curriculum that is so important and pull in those mini lessons that help with it. When you get to the PBL Works site, there'll be a green spot that asks you for a code. Just ignore that code. You haven't taken a class from them, so you don't have a code. We've also given you some other resources. Currently, we have a Project-Based Learning Institute starting up. It's actually going right now, but the first live session is on the 10th of November, so you're more than welcome to join us up until then. We've given you the direct link to the PBL Works website, which has so many resources on there. We have given you the computational thinking ideas that are listed on the ITSD website, as well as online computer science PD at Codeorg, because Codeorg has some pretty good pieces to get started with.
Yeah, and we have courses that we teach as well for beginning computer science and elementary integration, and we're kind of in between terms right now, so we're kind of ending some stuff and starting some new stuff. So if you're looking for something like that, feel free to contact us, and we can connect you to other resources as well, hopefully in the next few weeks. But code.org, even though it's not my favorite way to teach computer science to students using the hour of code stuff, they have a really great teacher course there. They do live workshops, but this is their asynchronous self-paced workshop for CS discoveries, and it really does give you, even though it shows you it's their platform, it shows you how to kind of understand some of the basics of CS if you are not there yet.
And we're really excited that we're going to get to do this small little pilot in our region. And we hope to be able to do this statewide and bigger if it goes well. But we are providing some mini grants for some elementary teachers in rural and remote areas to investigate CS and project-based learning and put together a unit, get some coaching. We have some funding to help them put in some supplies for how are you going to actually do this, because we know that some of the computer science materials are just out of reach for some of our districts to purchase at this time. So we're hoping to help with that. We're doing a very small 15 people pilot this year, but hoping to build off of that success in the future so that we can share project-based learning and CS really do go together, and they go together at a very young age.
And maybe we will be presenting on that pilot next year and have some really cool examples of units as we're actually supporting the teachers in creating the units and implementing and then analyzing how it went. So we're going to have a lot of data when we're done, and hopefully some really cool examples of, well, what did you actually do? How did you integrate? And what did you use? So we're excited for that.
Yeah, very excited for that.
Thank you, Dan. We're glad you're here. Stacy, I'm reading your comment here.
Yes, I'm reading Stacy's comment and I love it.
Yeah, pacing guides make me want to punch things. I can't deal with them at all. I started out as a special ed teacher, so I was always like, what do you mean I have 2 days to teach a thing? That's not how this works. And I don't think that's how it works outside of special ed either, honestly. So it's like, you can use one story for an ELA connection to multiple other curricular standards, and you can stick with that story instead of your Apple theme. A story or a book can be your theme for an entire semester. I see people do that all the time. So it is hard when districts are still catching up with that idea.
Well, and just pacing guide for me, I've always felt so arbitrary, because who decided? Who decided that by October, third graders were supposed to do X? Like, where's the research based in this? What about my third graders? What if my third graders aren't ready for that yet?
Yeah, I have.
When I'm looking at things in project-based unit, I have more time to meet with my students independently, individualize my instruction with my students, because I've set up this environment where students are engaged independently. They're working with small groups. They're working by themselves, which frees me up to do that really deep, independent student-to-student learning, which helps me with that pacing guide, because I can hit all those standards so much easier when I'm doing some one-on-one coaching within a bigger project.
And they're kind of doing their own differentiation, you know. So
it's true differentiation.
Yeah, they're like, what are you doing to differentiate? I'm like, well, here are all the options they have, and we pick the one that I will help them pick one if I need to. You know, but it's a balancing act. But
it can be tricky for some students who play school well. Those students that play school well, they know how to do their worksheets, they know how to memorize and regurgitate on the test. Some of those students will struggle when we have an open-ended concept and when they are driving their own learning, because they just want to know how they get the A.
Yeah.
And there is no A in project-based learning. There is share with me what you are learning, and you continue to learn more. So you're never going to be at the end. So no, I can't give you a step-by-step directions on how to get an A. I need to see you working. Like, I want to hear what you're thinking. That can be hard for some students. What else do we have, Catherine? We could talk forever.
I think that's it. And I know we're supposed to be done at 11:40, so I think we can wrap it up. And next on the schedule is the lunch break. So that's pretty cool. The networking will be open. So in the main room for Hop In, you'll be able to see the networking button on the left. And if you weren't here last night playing with that after the keynote, it's we joke that it's like speed dating for teachers. It's basically you click a button and somebody else clicks a button, and then it puts you in a room together, and then you meet and you chat. It's actually really fun. And even I am an introvert, and even I actually kind of think it's fun. So don't be too afraid to try that. There's also the capture the flag still going on that you can do at your own pace anytime, which is also on that left-hand button. And then we'll be back for our introduction to strands 3 and 4 at 12:30, and more sessions after that this afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. It's been so nice to be able to interact with you, even if just in chat, and share a few reasons why we're so passionate about the connection between CS and project-based learning.
Thank you so much.